Team Liquid. What I like about this matchup particularly is I feel like FaZe, of the three opponents that Team Liquid could have been facing up against this weekend, this is the one that, to me, goes toe-to-toe the closest in terms of firepower.
I think FaZe should feel confident. Yesterday, they absolutely manhandled Nip. They looked amazing.
They looked great.
Yeah, I could see why it's difficult to try to pick who'd come out ahead before we saw this veto.
But Stu can't quite find an angle. He will drop Brokey, but Rain, who's done everything thus far, pushes this into the 1v1. He's got to close this gap, get up close, tags him so much through the box, and finishes him off. And that's a round one for Liquid. Nico, 1v3, has a player in the open, jumping, hoping, was an fly, and there's the head on display. He takes it. They're not going to put anybody on tons. They flash through, they sprint in. And Rain, well, he has low health, but he does still have the AK cold with everything to do, just popping knock-ins. He's cleared 3 bodies and the 4th. And Elise is just tucked back behind box, taking damage. Down he goes. Brokey's on the bomb. And Brokey's removed by Nitro, who takes 2 kills.
Oh, you heard it.
Kill them. There it is. It goes high. Rain off of the side takes 2. And look at the damage off of the utility. Bombs dropped on top of it. FaZe. They are staring a 16th round in the face. And they're just going to desperately try to sprint in. This one's over. Brokey could go as fast as he wants. FaZe, no, they've got it. An excellent T-side from them. It is not a good place to be, unless you're FaZe. This is gonna feel real good for them to start off 2020, taking down what was the second best team of 2019. Knocking on the door of Liquid is the new contenders of FaZe Clan. It's all over. There it is. Done. 16-5, 11 rounds of a lead to shut down Inferno. I mean, what's ballsy is this isn't just their Dust 2 going incredibly well. This is them coming on to Liquid's map choice and sending a message.
Yo, that's not our room. That's not our room.
That's not our room.
We're up here.
What do we got in here?
It's just because their PCs are just upstairs.
You got your Yeezy. Can you give me a MTV cribs tour? Me?
Of the stage, yeah.
Well, these are the famous stairs of London.
Whoa, is that a Big Ben right there?
You can see clearly Big Ben right there, still under construction since 1999. Some fresh London rain in between games. So where we do the walk on. Now we're backstage, see where the magic happens. Standard blinding light right there.
Standard. Comes with every stage.
Fall off.
We'll put some shoes on.
Oh.
Oh shit.
Sorry.
Dude, I hate this song. This is your hype song?
No. My hype song's next.
This is like the setting up music, and then by the time the song ends, I should be fully set up. See, told you, by the next song comes on, I'm set up. Now, it's hype. I would box from top right to bottom left. Yeah. Alright, I'm gonna use a different crosshair now. I'll use my crosshair, use mine. Size 1.5, I wanna take this 0.5. Size 1.5? You know me, I'm already on it, man. I'm your biggest fan. I wanna make a song like this. I'll be the guy that just makes noises. Exactly. And, you know, I'll have a sick verse. You know, I'll start writing right now. So I'll just give it some time.
Alright.
Yeah.
Next vlog.
I'll drop my
All
album
your
there.
verses.
Dropping album next vlog.
What are you calling it?
Twisted Mind. This guy twist. Someone break his fucking wrist.
Get him.
Shooting him in the back.
Got him.
I feel as though for NIP, you're definitely the David in this scenario.
I think for Liquid, this is a teething tournament, and now as they move forward, they'll be able to roll into the year. That's why the game, if they win this one against FaZe later, it's going to be a real tough one, because I think that was a wake-up call for them to get stuck into it.
Well, I think the NIP that we saw on the first day was completely different from the NIP that ended yesterday, which is why they're even in this position.
Yes.
So if they come in with some of the confidence they were able to pick up in that best of 3 yesterday, the analysts are right. This can get spicy. This can be very dangerous for Team Liquid, who looked flat.
NIP are pretty much out of grenades. They are entirely out of grenades, so this might be a bit rough. They're ready for this retake. Look, that blocks out at least 2 players. Now the smoke is up, and they're going to be defusing very quickly while playing a bodyguard in front. Naf doesn't care if he's going to go down. They just want to defuse it. There it is. Oh my god, that is so well coordinated for Liquid.
He's got the first kill. That's a big one to find, and now he's got to hunt down Lekro. Oh, that's the bomb, and he's got it. 35 seconds.
Oh, Twist in the middle though, headshot, 20 seconds. They can barely make it to the bomb site. And Twist hiding in the corner, he's got the Krieg ready, and the bomb is on the ground. They might get it anyway if he's really quick about it. He's tapping in those numbers, they're right on top of him. Twist flanking it in, and there's Liquid picking up a 15th round, and that's gonna slow them down. Oh, this is huge. Oh, they still get him through the smoke. Nock somehow able. They have to try and make their way through. Elige gets dropped by Nock. What a big round for him to come through. And now Stewie and Twist, a 2-on-3, and the bomb isn't even down. They're just waiting, NIP. They're happy to do that, and they'll get another kill. A triple for Nock. This is a great knockout punch for NIP and a quad kill for Nock. This is a beautiful round for the rookie to come through. He does make the jump down. He snuck around. Oh, just scoping up behind him, and Twist is gone. And now with a smoke up, Naf still able to find that kill. Nock, this is a 1 in a million, and he's going to try for it. And Naf, I mean, there's some magic left, isn't there? You need a good headshot or something. There's the gun barrel showing, just communicating. They even know it. They know exactly where they are. Rez trying for it. Plopsky going to be going down, and Liquid going to end up winning in overtime. 19-17, taking down NIP. But it costed almost everything they had here.
Come on, let the boys eat. They said we only have like 4 minutes.
4 minutes?
One more map between these teams. I'm really happy that we're starting off on Team Liquid's map pick after losing that series yesterday.
I don't know if we're going to get a repeat of yesterday. Obviously, we can't see Inferno in the seconds. Just as Stewie said in the pregame, they're not playing like themselves, and FaZe knew that.
Right.
That's the most interesting part of all this. You run these maps back, and you might get different results, so hopefully that is the case today. Whether or not FaZe win, because they still might be favored.
Tower Nova.
Upside the head. Upside the tower.
Twists. He's gonna have to do everything because Nico, this is the one-man show. He's sitting on 3 frags already, runs forward, grabs himself that AK, but Twist takes down both. And just like that, it's Liquid on fire. Here's Coldzera with a flashbang, looking to just line up a bunch of bodies, but he is fully blind as he retreats down from the apps.
Oh, it's a little awkward.
Yeah, it's getting weird here. Pistol's gonna prevail for a bit, but Brokey hits the shot and can very well bring this back.
Lightning fast from Brokey.
Another perhaps. Elige pinned down. There's the round for FaZe. 7 in a row.
On their feet.
And Stewie, 1v3 now, knows Nico's still pinned into this position, doesn't know Cole's about to gain vision, and now it is the clutch attempt. Very, very doable here for Stu. Stewie seems to be reading this correctly. Cole's gonna confirm it, and down he goes. That's the 1v3 clutch from Stu. Could go for another peek. He even gets that second shot, and Stewie, but he just can't land them. We have seen Elige close these sorts of clutches.
Yeah.
And he has the kit to play off of, but Brokey, he's not missing shots.
Quick movement.
They have a smoke to block him off, but instead they opt to put it on bomb. And Cold, oh, he's ready to go for the wide swing. Stewie's just going to be desperately trying to stick this. Down he goes. And now Twist knows he's screwed. It's over. 16-9 for FaZe, picking up Liquid's map pick.
This still isn't Liquid where we want them. Going into map 2 does too. It was a brawl yesterday. Once again, the confidence for Liquid must be shook.
Last two pieces of utility here from Nitro being thrown, trying to set up Stewie on the sidearm. Coldzera just gives him a kill. And there's Olaf now. He's got the cover. Stewie's honed in. But Stewie goes down.
Oh boy.
Cold trying to cover short. He two-toppled Rain. Oh, another tap. Good night.
Oh my God.
Nap, 1 versus 3, has already put a kill on the tally. Can he keep this rolling? He peeks wide, and that's it. Good night. FaZe taking a second best of 3 over Liquid here. Ladies and gentlemen, Spring Series Week 1 comes to a close. Higher seeding and a fat stack of cash for FaZe Clan.
And then down here, we can put any of the code that we want to be included in this function. So basically this function is just gonna cube this number. So we could just type out num times num times num, right? That's gonna give us num cubed. So that's all well and good. And if I come down here, I can execute this function. So I can basically just call it, I'll say cube, and why don't we pass it a 3? So I'm gonna go ahead and pass it a 3. And I'm gonna save this. And now let's go ahead and run this code. So we'll run the code and you'll see down here, nothing happened, right? So nothing got printed out in our program. In fact, when we called this cube function, it didn't really do anything. So let me try to print this out. So maybe if we print this function out, it'll give us back the information that we want. So type out print and we'll print out the value of the function. I'm just gonna click play. If you look down here, it says none. So when I printed out the value of this function, it told me none. But really this function is supposed to be cubing the number. And here's how we can use the return statement in Python. I can come over here and I can just say return. And now Python is gonna return whatever value we put over here to the right. So when I call this cube function and I give it a 3, Python's gonna go off, it's gonna execute this function. When it sees this return statement, it's gonna say, okay, I want to give a value back to whatever called this function, and it's gonna return this value. Now, when I print out cube 3, it should print out the answer because we get an answer back. So when I play this, you'll see down here, it says 27, so we got the correct answer. So I could do this with anything. Why don't we cube like 4? Or something. So now I'll run this and you can see we're constantly getting the correct answer back. So that's the basics of using this return statement. It allows us to return a value back to the caller. In other words, back to whatever's calling the function. So I just want to illustrate this point a little bit further. I'm going to come up here. I'm actually going to create a variable. So I'm going to create a variable called result, and I'm just going to set it equal to cube 4. This variable result is going to store the value that gets returned from the cube function. So it's not going to store like cube 4, it's going to store the value that gets returned from executing that function. So now if I came down here and printed out result, it's actually just going to print out 64 again because that's the value that it's storing. So this return statement can be really useful for like getting information back. back from a function. We can use something like a parameter, like this for as a parameter, and we can give information to a function, and then we can use the return statement to get information back from a function. And I do just want to point out one more thing. I'm actually not able to put any code after this return statement. So if I came down here and tried to put like a print statement, this actually isn't going to work. So this is never going to get printed out. So if I just typed out like code, right here, code. That's because when I use this return keyword, it breaks us out of the function. So Python's going to go through, it's going to execute the code in the function. Whenever it sees this return keyword, it's just going to break back out and we're going to be done. So we'll never be able to reach this line of code. So that's the basics of using return statements, and you can return any data type you want. We could easily return like a string or a Boolean or an array. It doesn't really matter. You can return whatever you want. And a lot of times, in a lot of situations, you're going to want to get a value back from a function. In this tutorial, I want to talk to you guys about using if statements in Python. Now, if statements are a special structure in Python where we can actually help our programs to make decisions. So by using an if statement, I could execute certain code when certain conditions are true, and I could execute other code when other conditions are true. So basically, if statements allow our programs to respond to the input that they're given. So depending on the data that we're using in the program, our programs will be able to respond. So when certain data is certain values, we can do certain things. And when other data is other values, we can do other things. So your programs are essentially becoming a lot smarter. And actually, if statements are things that we as human beings deal with every day. So, as you go throughout your day, generally you're dealing with if statements all the time. So I want to kind of give you guys a brief introduction into if statements, and we'll talk about some of the common if statements that you'd see in everyday life. And then we'll go ahead and do a really awesome example to kind of like show you guys what if statements can do for us. So over here in my text editor, I just have this little text file, and in here I wrote out a bunch. Over here in my text editor, I just have this little text file, and in here I wrote out a bunch of if statements that a lot of people will encounter on a daily basis. So here's the first one. It says, I wake up, if I'm hungry, I eat breakfast. And so let's break this down a little bit. Up here it says, if I'm hungry. And this is a condition, right? This is either going to be true or it's going to be false, right? If it's true, I'm going to go ahead and eat breakfast, right? If it's false, I'm just going to skip whatever was in here and move on, right? So that's the basics of an if statement, right? We have a condition, in this case, if I'm hungry. If the condition's true, then we do the action, so we eat breakfast. Otherwise, we just skip it. So down here we have another one. It says, I leave my house. If it's cloudy, I bring an umbrella. Otherwise, I bring sunglasses. And so this one is a little bit more complex than the one we just looked at. You'll see we have our condition, right? It says if it's cloudy. If that condition's true, we're going to bring the umbrella. But in this case, if the condition's false, there's something else that we want to do. So in the case up here, if this condition was false, we just moved on. But now, if this condition's false, then we're going to go ahead and bring sunglasses. So that's another example of an if statement. It's a little bit more complex. Finally, I have one more down here, and this one's even more complex. It says, I'm at a restaurant. If I want meat, I order a steak. So if this condition's true, we order the steak. But if this condition is false, then we're going to move on, and we're actually going to check another condition. So I'm going to say, otherwise, if I want pasta, I order spaghetti and meatballs. This is another condition. If this condition's true, we get the spaghetti. If it's not true, then finally we're going to move on down here and we'll just default to ordering the salad. So all three of these if statements are valid if statements. It's just they get more and more complex as we go down the list. So hopefully that's, you can kind of wrap your head around what if statements are. We're basically specifying conditions, if those conditions are true, we're going to do certain things. And if those conditions are false, we can do other things, or we can check other conditions. All right, so let's head over to our Python file and we'll start writing some actual Python. So in here in my app.python file, I want to create an if statement. And I'm going to show you guys a very basic if statement in this tutorial. And then in the next tutorial, we're going to look at some more advanced if statements. And so what I want to do is create a Boolean variable. So I'm going to create a Boolean variable that's going to store whether or not the user is a male. So it's just going to be called is_male. And I'm going to set this equal to true because I'm a male. So we have this Boolean variable, right? And right now we have it set equal to true. I can actually use an if statement to check to see what the value of this variable is. And if it's true, I can do something. So if I want to use an if statement, all I have to do is just type out if, and then I just need to type out a condition. So basically I would have to type out like something that's going to be true or false. Like, for example, in the other page, we were specifying like if I'm hungry or if it's cloudy. Here, we're just going to check to see if is male. So in other words, if the person is male. And so remember, this has to be it has to be able to be reducible to a true or a false value. So in our case, we're just using a Boolean because that's like the easiest thing we can do. So I said if, I specified my true or false condition, and now I want to just type a colon. And what I want to do now is make a new line. And so anything that I put below this with an indentation is actually going to be executed when that condition's true. So I could put print, and down here I could just put you are a male. And now you'll see what happens when I run this program. It's going to go down here and it's going to say you are a male. But if I changed is male to false, so instead of this being true, I just changed it to false, now all of a sudden it's not going to print anything. So it's just going to be blank down here. That's because this condition wasn't true. So anything that I put below this if declaration and that has an indentation like that is going to be executed when the if statement is true. We can also use another keyword in Python, which is called else. And else is basically going to be like otherwise. So you remember before we said, if it's cloudy, I'll bring an umbrella. Otherwise, I'll bring sunglasses. Well, this is going to be like our otherwise. So I can say down here, else. And now anything that I put below else is going to get printed out when that condition isn't true. So why don't we just put you are not a male. So now we're able to cover both of the situations for this variable. If it's false, we can cover that situation. So it says you are not a male. If it's true, we can cover that situation as well. So it'll say you are a male. So that's pretty cool. But we can also make these more complex. And actually, before I talk about that, you can put as much code as you want inside of an if statement. So I could have like, you know, dozens of lines of code if I wanted. I'm just giving you guys a very simple example. So why don't we make this more complex, and I'm gonna add another variable into the mix. So I'm gonna add another, you know, Boolean attribute into this mix. I'm gonna make another variable called is tall, and we're gonna set this equal to true as well. So now I have two variables in the mix. Let's say I wanted to write an if statement that will check both of those variables. So I could write an if statement that's like, if they're male and they're tall, or if they're male and they're not tall, or if they're not male and they're tall. Like, I could write out a bunch of if statements to check the combination of these variables. And so the way I can do that is by using one of two keywords. So the first keyword I want to show you guys is the or keyword. So I can come over here and I can say if is male or is underscore tall. And what this is basically going to do is it's going to say if the person is either male or if they're tall, then we want to do something. So this is only going to be true when one of these values is true, when one or both of those values is true. So down here we could actually put, instead of you are a male, we could put you are a male or tall or both. That's going to be more appropriate. And then down here, we would say you are neither male nor tall. And that's because if we execute the code inside of this else, that means that both of these guys are false, right? So I'm saying if they're male or they're tall, we're gonna execute whatever is in here. Otherwise, that means they're neither male nor tall. We're just gonna execute this down here. So let me show you guys how this works. I'll click play, and these are both true. So it's gonna say you are a male or tall or both. If I was to set one of these to false, so let's set is male equal to false. Now, it's still gonna say you are a male or tall or both. But if I set them both equal to false, now it's going to say you're neither male nor tall. So that's kind of the basics of using the OR operator. And there's another operator we can use which is called AND. And basically it's similar to OR except both of these conditions have to be true. So this is basically
Tuin 3 dong. Itu yang tadi.
Panggilan. Ya. Baru gue bilang jadi.
Short.
Halo, itu lagi di inside. Play lo banget. Ah, gue mati lagi. Ya udah ngapa menang. Gue tidur. Ayo depan lu.
Aduh kaget.
Mana?
Min.
Let's go guys.
Let's go.
Ngepick sekarang.
Waktu mid lo buat cuma.
Ini lah.
Pantas aja menang.
Kanan lock. Crossfire. Aku pulang. Kasih nih. Dua-duanya tadi di situ.
Bisa.
Flash siapa ini? Mana nih? Dua-duanya tadi.
Back.
Back anjing. Asik.
Cross range dong. Cepet gua. Happy nggak dikena?
Kurang happy.
Itu sama pisau.
Basically saying if the person is male and they're also tall, then we're going to execute whatever's in here. So we could actually change this text to say you are a tall male, because we know for a fact that if this is getting executed, they're both male and tall. We can also change this print statement down here. This could say you are either not male or not tall or both. So you can see it's basically just saying that you're either not one of them or you're not both of them. So we click the play button and you'll see because they're both false, it's going to say you are either not male or not tall or both. But if I make them both true, now it's going to say you are a tall male. If I was going to make one of these false though, so let's make is tall false. Now it's not going to execute this first print statement. It's going to execute the one inside of the else. So it'll say you are either not male or not tall or both. So that's the basics of and or, and you'll be using those a lot as you use your if statements. But there's actually one more thing we can do. We can add in some more conditions. So up here I'm checking if they're male and they're tall, but what if I wanted to check if they're male and they're not tall? So if they're like a short male. I can use another keyword in Python called else if, or really it's just typed out ELIF, and it stands for else if. And after this we can put another condition. So over here I'm going to check to see if they're male and they're not tall. So I'm going to say else if male is male, and now I can type in not tall. And the way I can do that is by saying not and open and close parentheses and saying is tall. And basically when I use this not function, it's going to negate whatever is inside of here. So if this was true, it's going to make it false. And if this was false, it's going to make it true. So basically that'll tell us whether or not they're tall. And then I'm going to use a colon, and now down here, inside of here, we're basically just going to type out any of the code that we want to happen when this condition's true. So down here we can just print out you are a short male. And there's actually one more condition that we want to check for, which would be if they're not male and they're tall. So we can make one more else if, and I'm actually just going to copy this guy and we'll paste it down here. And so I want to say if not is male, and is tall. So now we're checking to see if they're male and, or if they're not male and they're tall. So here we could say you are not a male but are tall. So essentially here we have an if statement that's going to cover every single condition for these two variables. So in every single situation of the two values of these variables, we're going to be able to print something out for it. So if I made both of these true, it's basically going to tell us you are a tall male. If I make is male false, it's going to tell us you are not a male but are tall. If I made is male true and is tall false, then it's going to tell us you are a short male. And if I made both of these false, it's going to tell us you are either not male or not tall or both. And actually we need to change this. So this should say you are not a male and not tall. So that would be a better printout for that situation. So you can basically see how we can use ifs, else ifs, and else in order to help our program to make decisions and really to respond to the different data in our programs. So I'm able to respond to every combination of the values for these two variables, and that's really cool. So in this example we were just using simple Boolean variables, but in the next tutorial I'm going to show you guys how you can actually use something called comparison operators. So we could compare like two numbers or two strings, and we could use those as our conditions. But for now I think this is a good introduction into if statements, so I'll see you guys in the next tutorial.
Good grammar and spelling are important, but if you want to write essays that inspire, messages that forge brighter connections, and emails that get the job done, you need to think about more than just grammar and spelling. This sentence is grammatically correct.
In this tutorial, I want to talk to you some more about if statements in Python. More specifically, we're going to be looking at using comparisons inside of our if statements. So if you're following along with the course, in the last tutorial, I talked to you guys about just the basics of if statements, and we used a couple different Boolean variables. And depending on the values of those Booleans, we were able to do certain things. In this tutorial, we're going to look at another way to use if statements, which is with comparisons. So instead of just using Boolean values, we can actually compare different values. So like I could compare a couple numbers, or I could compare a couple strings, and depending on the results of those comparisons, we can do certain things. So this is going to be pretty cool, and this is really going to give you guys a full understanding of what you can do with if statements. So for this tutorial, I actually want to create a Python function, and this function is going to give us the maximum number that we pass into it. So this function is going to take 3 parameters as input, and it's going to print out the biggest number that we give it. So let's create this function. I'm just going to say def, and I'm just going to call it max num, and inside of these parentheses, I'm going to specify that I want 3 parameters as input. So I'm going to say num1, num2, and num3. So basically, we're passing it 3 numbers, and this function will return the largest of the 3. So in order to figure out which of these numbers is the largest, we're going to have to use an if statement. So I can say if, and over here I need to specify a condition, right? So I need to put like a true or a false value. And so what we can actually do is we can compare these different numbers. So I could say if num1 is greater than or equal to num2, and num1 is greater than or equal to num3. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm comparing these different numbers. So I'm saying if the first number is greater than or equal to the second number. And this is a comparison. So when you think about it, when we compare these 2 numbers, we're going to end up with a true or a false value, right? Num1 is either greater than or equal to num2, or it's not. It's actually a Boolean value, right? It's either true or it's false. Same thing over here. The result of this comparison is either true or it's false. So technically I'm putting a true or false value in there. I'm just getting that true or false value by using a comparison. And you'll notice over here, we're using something called a comparison operator. And basically this is just like how we want to compare them. So we're saying like greater than or equal to in this case. So down here, if this whole condition is true, in other words, if the results of these two comparisons end up being true, then we know that num1 is the biggest. So I can just return num1. I can say return num1. But we also want to check some other conditions. So I can say elif, and now I want to do some other comparisons. So I'm going to say else if num2 is greater than or equal to num1 and num2 is greater than or equal to num3. So I'm doing essentially what I did up here except for num2. So again, I'm comparing these different numbers, and this is going to end up being a true or a false value depending on the result of the comparison. So down here again, we can just return num2, because if all of this is true, that means we're going to end up returning num2. And then finally we can just say else. So if num1 isn't the biggest and num2 isn't the biggest, then we can pretty much assume that num3 is the biggest. So now we have our function. So down here, I'm actually just going to call this function. So I'm just going to say, actually I'll print out the result. So I'll say max num, and we'll pass in like 3, 4, 5. So we're basically calling that new function that we just made. And I'm going to go ahead and run this program. So you can see down here in the output, we printed out 5 because that was the biggest. If I was to change this middle one to the biggest, so we make the middle one 40, now it'll be able to take on that situation. And finally, I can make this like 300, and it'll be able to handle that. So no matter which number, num1, num2, or num3 ends up being the biggest, it's able to tell us without a problem. So these comparisons are a really, really, really common way to make if statements. And a lot of times you're going to want to be comparing different values inside of Python. So over here we're comparing numbers, but we could also compare strings. So I could easily make these both like, I could make this like dog, and I can make this dog, and I could say a different operator. So I could say like this double equal sign would mean equal. So I could basically say like if this string is equal to that string. So you can basically like compare all different data types. I could compare numbers, strings. You could also compare Booleans. So once again, these are comparison operators, and this one is greater than or equal to, but there's a bunch of other comparison operators we can use. So the most basic is just going to be a double equal sign, and that basically checks to see if the two values are equal. So it'll say like if number 1 is equal to number 2. We can also say not equals, and this exclamation point will basically mean not equal. So it's if num1 is not equal to num2. We also have greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. And those are kind of all of the operators, or all the, the basic comparison operators that you're going to be using in Python. So using comparisons is really awesome, and there's going to be tons and tons of situations inside of Python where you're going to want to compare different values. So these can be extremely useful. In this tutorial, I'm going to talk to you guys about building a calculator in Python. Now, if you've been following along with this course, you'll know that in the beginning of the course, we actually created a very basic calculator. Basically, the user could just enter in 2 numbers, and our calculator would add the numbers together and spit out the answer. In this tutorial, I want to show you guys how to build a more advanced calculator. So this calculator is going to be able to perform all of the basic arithmetic operations. So we can add, subtract, multiply, and divide. And we'll actually allow the user to specify which one of those they want to do. So the user will enter in a number, they'll enter in whatever operator they want to use, so plus, minus, divide, multiply, and then they'll enter in the second number and we'll perform the operation for them. So this is going to be pretty cool, and it's going to show you how we can use if statements in like a practical application. So let's get started. The first thing we want to do is get input from the user. So I'm going to create 3 variables, one for the first number, one for the second number, and one for the operator. And we'll basically store the values that the user inputs into those variables. So the first one will just be num1. And I'm gonna set this equal to input, and we're gonna give this a prompt. So I'll say enter first number. And here's actually the thing is, whatever the user enters, we're gonna wanna convert it into a number. So generally in Python, when we get input from the user, no matter what they put in, it just gets converted into a string. But we don't want a string because we're gonna have to be adding or subtracting or multiplying these numbers together. So whenever they enter in the number, I just want to immediately convert it to an actual like number data type instead of a string. So what I can do is I can actually say float, and I can surround this entire input tag with parentheses. And now what this is going to do is it's going to immediately convert whatever the user inputs into a float. Now that's going to mean that they're going to have to insert a number, otherwise we'll get an error. But for the most part, this should work out for us. So I'm actually just going to copy this guy, and we'll go ahead and paste it over here, and we'll paste it one more time. So we're basically just trying to get 3 pieces of input from the user. So the second thing we want to get is the operator. So I'm just going to say OP for operator, and I'll actually get rid of this float because we want to keep this as a string, and I'll just say enter operator. So that's going to be like plus, minus, multiplication, whatever. And then finally down here we'll get num2, and again we're going to want to convert this to a float. So I'll say enter second number. So now basically what we're doing is we're getting the first number, we're getting the operator, and we're getting the second number from the user. So what we need to do now is we need to figure out what is inside of this OP. In other words, we need to figure out what operator the user was trying to do. So are they trying to do addition? Are they trying to do subtraction? Like, we want to figure that out. So we can use an if statement in order to figure that out. So I'm going to come down here, and I'm basically just going to create an if statement. So I'm going to say if, and we want to check a condition. So I'm basically going to check to see if this operator is equal to a plus sign. So I can say if OP equals plus sign. And now if the operator is equal to plus sign, I'm just going to print out num1 plus num2. But let's say that instead of a plus sign, they entered in something else. So we can say elif OP is equal to, and now we'll check if it's a minus sign. And so here we'll just print num1 minus num2. And actually I forgot to put a colon here. So we can just do these for everything. So now we can say elif OP is equal to division, and here we'll just divide the two numbers. So I can print out num1 divided by num2. And finally we'll do the same thing for multiplication. So I'll say elif OP is equal to asterisk, and we'll just print out num1 times num2. All right, so basically over here we have every condition, but I also want to put in an else statement. So in the case that the user enters in an operation that's not like one of the 4 that we specified up here, I just want to throw an error. So I'm just going to say OP, or actually we just say else, and here we'll just print out like invalid operator. All right, so this if statement should give us everything we want. Basically, I'm just checking to see if it's equal to a plus sign, a minus sign, a division sign, or a multiplication sign. And depending on which one it's equal to, we'll do a different operation. So let's go ahead and run this and see how we do. So I'm gonna run this program, and it says enter first number, let's enter 5, enter an operator. operator, so why don't we just do addition and enter a second number. Let's do 23. So now it prints out the answer.
Oh, he will. Masuta, very much an active hold so far. Some huge contributions for the Vitality roster. Doesn't feel like any degree of dead weight at all. So we're holding this banana angle. It's no fun for Flash I'd need a flash to force him off the line. It does seem like Golden has the one, but he might do the dry here. Oop. And the tag. Flush is going to be working with 16 HP for the rest of this round. Never mind, it's taken down. Straight through the half wall. Zywoo just styling on him.
Just can't go in dry like that, especially against someone like Zywoo. No fun for anyone. Masuta's going to find JW. And now the two still trying to brute force their way towards B. Does only implement the attention of RPK eventually. As Krim's looking to kind of lean back away. It doesn't look too good so far, at least in this round. 5 standing against them, which is great news if they want to maintain those AWPs, of course, that are now being siphoned through by Shox and Zywoo, so they can sit quite comfortably. And there's the closer. So, looks like Vitality getting back in, stopping any sort of run from Fnatic, obviously getting the last 3. And there's Zywoo, unfazed, no utility, and obviously just after the tag, right through the wall.
Not too shabby.
Money should be seeing Fnatic go for an eco here. Double orbs out on that CT side. AKs are looking good.
If it's an eco, do you know who might want to cast?
Oh.
I know he's done like the big finals, right?
Yeah,
I
don't know if he does.
Does he go down to group stages?
Honestly,
anymore.
Day1 groups, there's no way he gets the casting microphone on. I mean, it's not his style.
It's not worth his time, is it?
Exactly. He doesn't get out of bed if it's not a playoff game.
People want to hear his voice. I don't know if he'll...
You guys are pretty much right here, first game of the tournament, I'm a grand finals eco round caster these days, so it's beneath me, but it's still pretty nice.
We have a fun topic you want to talk to us about. You can join our ways of talking rubbish.
Oh yeah, well, I did get a haircut yesterday, so we could talk about that.
Oh yeah?
He's looking very handsome.
How do you feel about the haircut, right?
I feel okay. I don't feel too different. I mean, some people feel very different after they get a haircut, I feel better. I use less shampoo, so that's pretty cool. So I'm saving
that felt like an attack on me then, Rush. Was that an attack on me?
No, what do you mean? No, of course no.
You're supposed to be commentating. I was about to die, bro.
Oh my god. Cast the game, dude.
The smoke's down. There's nothing to worry about. Look,
so disrespectful.
Run and boost.
Double run boost.
Double run boost.
Give me a good cam here, Rush.
See what we can do.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Kind of made it work. That was all right.
That was nice. I'll give you a 5 out of 7.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, and that's a round done. Easy.
So Rush,
yo,
what about the beard though? You didn't tell the people about the beard.
That is really nice. I do like that a lot. I got my beard trimmed as well, and whenever I do it myself, it's always hard to do the line.
Oh,
I'm sorry. It's okay. I'm sorry.
Oh dear.
Just a public service announcement about facial hair as well for any of our Counter-Strike fan base. Just when you're looking at your facial hair and you see the hair on your neck primarily. I would encourage you to have a professional or even do it yourself. Just Trim it up.
Trim it up.
A little bit.
We're talking
I'll
about,
try it out.
we're talking
Neck
about the
beard.
neck beard.
Yeah.
Yeah, now...
Ooh.
Shox has got his second frag of this half. Zywoo wants to immediately slap him. The spray's not bad. Flusher wants more. He knows they're retreating. The smokes are good, though. They can just tuck into the site, and Zywoo, oh, he's so poised and ready for another. If Flusher was to drop it off, that moment of inaccuracy would be when Zywoo could strike. He does rattle off a shot, jumping for info as well, and it's all calculated, looking to reposition. Flusher, he gets a lot of freedom here on the B site. Look at that, he spotted RPK, he's going to dunk him down to about 40 HP.
RPK's dead here, he's got no idea.
He's cooked. And that's the freedom we're talking about, but once again, the classic Fnatic move of gaining a site control and not having the bomb. It's not out of the realms of possibility. Flusher is in the most ridiculous of spots. What do you see if you're a CT rounding that corner? Can I have a Masuta or a Zywoo? Yeah. What do you see? Nothing, because he's jumped off.
JW is still coming towards the B side of things, though, so going to flash, they're going to fight.
They don't have a smoke. They kind of have to secure the cross.
This is making me
That's all
nervous.
they've got. And Flusher does so well at this, you just don't expect it. Shox gets caught out, but delivers a bullet. And now the 1v1. Shox with the AWP, smoke and kit. Low HP up against JW. Fully locked and loaded.
It's a very hard angle for Shox to even contest. Such low HP. What's his hopes and dreams here? Hoping that Shox gets nervous, starts to cross, and he hits the shot. But I think this timer, the standoff,
For statues or?
Fnatic. Yeah, no lag here. This
It
is...
moved at the exact same time. All right, well, this round's done.
Yeah.
Shox is not going
Stick
for
a
this
fork
one.
in her.
He's making sure that JW doesn't run away and hold on to the AK, but he's going to actually lose the AWP. That's going to be gifted on over. JW is happy as you like to pick that one up through. Oh, didn't make his way towards the smoke grenade at the end there, but the money on the side of things for Fnatic is not fantastic.
These noobs didn't save the smoke.
Yeah, he didn't get there in time, you know. So, the odds at the top of the screen from GG Bet seem to favour the predictions from the majority of us. I like how Stun has thrown a little bit of a curveball in there, and I don't
think it's
mind,
about shout.
especially with the veto that we've seen come through, right?
I would have definitely dropped my, like, I think I was like up to like maybe
You were
75, something
75%,
around that.
yeah.
I was quite confident, but I honestly didn't think the Vertigo would come out. So I think now I'd drop that down to maybe a 60.
It's something that we weren't expecting.
Hello.
Who is that? JW onto Apex here. There's a big opening. Still one AWP up on Zywoo towards the top of middle.
These AWPs from CTs and Ts alike are really opening up rounds. It's rare to see on Inferno.
28. So our calculator actually works. Let's try another operator just to make sure. So we'll do 6, and why don't we multiply it by, I don't know, 5.23. So now we go off and we do the multiplication, and looks like we got our answer. So our calculator seems to be working. And so basically all we did was we got the input from the user, and then we used if statements to figure out what they wanted to do, right? So we could check to see if they wanted addition. We could check to see if they wanted subtraction or division or multiplication. And we could also check to see if they entered in an invalid operator. So actually, why don't we try that too? So I'll enter in like 5, and now we'll just enter in like an open and closed parentheses and a 4. So you can see here it's able to tell, like the program's smart enough to know that that's not a valid operator. So these if statements can be really powerful, and we can use them in combination with getting the user input to create a little calculator. In this tutorial, I want to talk to you guys about using dictionaries in Python. Now, a dictionary is a special structure in Python which allows us to store information in what are called key value pairs. So essentially, I can just create a bunch of these different key value pairs, and then when I want to access a specific piece of information inside of the dictionary, I can just refer to it by its key. So the word dictionary is actually pretty appropriate here. If you guys are familiar with a normal dictionary, in a normal dictionary you'd have a word, and then you'd have a definition associated to that word. So in this situation, the word would be the key. In other words, the word is what like uniquely identifies it inside of the dictionary, and then the value would be the actual definition. So this is going to make more sense once we start working with this, but I just wanted to give you guys a quick introduction. So in this tutorial, I want to create a little program that will allow us to convert a 3-digit month name into the full month name. So I could convert, for example, like JAN to January, or I could convert MAR into March. Like I want to be able to have a program that can do that for us. And that's actually a pretty good use case for a dictionary. So we're actually going to create a dictionary, and I'm going to show you guys how we can do that. So the first thing we need to do in creating a dictionary is just give it a name. So I want to give this a specific name. So I'm just going to call this month conversions. And now I just want to set this equal to an open and closed curly bracket. So whenever we create a dictionary in Python, we're always going to want to create it inside of these open and closed curly brackets. And so inside of the dictionary, now we can start defining what are called key value pairs. So I can define a key, and then I can give it a corresponding value. And the way that we can do that is just by typing out the key and then typing out the value. So in our case, we're converting 3-digit month names into the full month names. So I would want to type out, for example, JAN, and then I can type a colon, and I want to type out the value I want to associate with it. So we could say January. I could basically do this for every combination. So I could say like FEB, and this would be February. And actually, after each one of these, we're going to need to put a comma. So I could do the same for March. You could say MAR. So essentially what I can do is I can specify an entry inside of this dictionary for each one of these. So this over here would be the key, and this over here would be the value. And here's one thing is all of these keys have to be unique. So if I was to come down here and change this to JAN, this is actually going to give us a little warning. So you can see down here it says dictionary contains duplicate keys. That's a no-no when we're creating dictionaries. So you always want to make sure that the keys are unique. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and create one of these for each one of the months, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about it. All right, so I've gone ahead and created an entry for all 12 of the months. So now we have a bunch of unique keys, and each one of those keys is associated with a different value. So this is the basics of creating a dictionary. Is we have a bunch of these different key value pairs, and now what we can actually do is we can access them from inside of this dictionary. So if I wanted to access a specific key or a specific value, all I have to do is come over here, and I'm actually just going to print it out onto the screen so we can see it. All I have to do is refer to the dictionary by name, so it's just called month conversions. And there's actually a bunch of different ways that I can access these month names. So I could access different entries inside of this dictionary. The first way is just by making a open and close square bracket, and inside here I can just type in one of the keys. So for example, inside here I could type in NOV, and what this should do is it should give us back the full name for November. So when I print this out, you'll see that we get back down here November. So I could do the same thing for, you know, any of these. We could say like MAR, and now we should get March back. So I'm able to refer to the key, and it's going to go into the dictionary, and it's going to give me the value that's associated to that key. There's actually another way we could do this too. So I could say month conversions dot get, and inside of here I could also pass in the name of a key. So I could pass in like DEC, and now we'll be printing out December. And what's cool about using this get function is I can actually specify a default value that I want to use if this key is not found. So there's going to be certain cases when we're dealing with dictionaries where you're going to put in a key that might not necessarily, the keys are unique. It might not necessarily map to a value inside of the dictionary, so you'd put in an invalid key. So let's just try to do that. So I'll just put like LUV. That's not a month abbreviation. So when I try to run this, you'll see we get this none down here. And in a lot of cases, you're gonna want to create some sort of a default value. So if I'm in the situation where I have a key that's not mappable to any values inside of this dictionary, I can actually pass it a default value. So inside this .get function, I can make a comma, and now I can pass in like a default value to get printed out. So I can say like not a valid key. And now when I put in the invalid key, instead of saying none, it's gonna go ahead and say not a valid key. So this is going to give us like a default value that we can fall back on. So these dictionaries are really awesome, and the keys over here don't have to be strings. So you could also use numbers. So for example, I could say like 0, 1, 10. Like I can put any numbers I want over here as keys as long as they're unique. And then I could access those keys just like I normally would down here. With this and of the month, create one. Now we have to ask to the just type November. So when I print this out, you'll see that we get back down here November. So I could do the same thing for, you know, any of these. We could say like MAR, and now we so actually specify a default value that I want to use if this key is not found. So there's going to be certain cases when we're dealing with dictionaries where you're going to put in a key that might not necessarily map to a value inside of the dictionary. So you'd put in an invalid key. So let's just try to do that. So I'll just put like L. you want to, I can say like not a valid default value. So inside this .get function, I can make a comma, and now I can pass in like a default value to get printed out. So I can say like not a valid key. And now when I put in the invalid key, instead of saying none, it's going to go ahead and say not a valid key. So this is going to give us like a default value that we can fall back on. So these dictionaries are really awesome, and the keys over here don't have to be strings. So you could also use numbers. So for example, I could say like 0, 1, 10. Like I can put any numbers I want over here.